My father died and left me this house in Seattle. I thought I was alone here. But then I heard footsteps in his study at midnight. It was Isabel, the sweet girl from next door who cared for him. She wasn't checking on the house. She was opening a safe I didn't even know existed. And she has the only key. The first thing I saw inside the safe was a photograph of me sleeping. Not recently. I was maybe 8 years old, curled under a blue Seahawks blanket in the bedroom I used before my parents divorced. The timestamp in the corner said October 14, 1994. Someone had taken the picture through my bedroom window. My father had labeled the back in black marker. Asterisk asterisk watching SUBJECTV. Phase 2 asterisk asterisk. I remember the smell before anything else. Damp wood. Metal. Rain pushing through cracked window frames. Isabel stood beside the open wall panel without moving. The safe door hung crooked on its hinges. The study light buzzed overhead. She didn't look surprised that I'd caught her. What bothered me was the expression on her face. Not fear. Recognition. Like she'd been waiting for me to finally understand something. On the desk behind her sat my father's old cassette recorder. The tape inside was already turning. I could hear my father breathing through static. Then his voice. Calm. Precise. Older than I remembered. If Tyler is hearing this, it means Isabel failed. The refrigerator hummed somewhere down the hall, and Isabel slowly closed her eyes. That was the moment I realized the safe had never been meant to stay closed. It had been waiting for me. My father died 3 weeks earlier. Massive stroke. That was the official explanation. The hospital in Tacoma called me just after midnight while I was sitting in my apartment outside Portland, pretending to finish tax reports I'd already stopped reading. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 8 months. Not after the argument about selling the house. He refused. Said the house needed to stay in the family. At the funeral, people described him as disciplined, private, intelligent. Nobody used the word warm. The house sat north of Seattle in an old neighborhood lined with cedar trees and uneven sidewalks slick from constant rain. Victorian architecture, narrow windows, sharp roof lines. The kind of place that always looked darker than the weather around it. Inside, everything smelled preserved. Dust, old paper, coffee grounds, the faint chemical scent of furniture polish. My father had arranged every object with obsessive precision. Pens parallel to desk edges, labels facing outward in the pantry, shoes aligned beneath the hallway bench. Nothing looked abandoned. It looked paused. I noticed Isabel the second evening. She lived directly across the street in a small gray craftsman house with yellow porch lights that stayed on all night. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair usually tied back. Calm posture. She watched people the way nurses watch heart monitors. I knew she'd been helping my father before he died. The lawyer mentioned it casually during the inheritance paperwork. Part-time caregiver. Companion. The strange thing was how comfortable she felt inside the house. Too comfortable. She walked directly to the kitchen drawer where my father kept the wine opener without asking. She knew which hallway light flickered if you switched it too quickly. She knew the upstairs bathroom door stuck during cold weather. At first, I told myself that happened naturally after months of caregiving. Then, she mentioned the red ledger. I'd found it earlier that afternoon hidden beneath insulation in the attic. I never told her. But while rinsing coffee mugs under yellow sink light, she casually asked whether I'd opened it yet. Water dripped from my hands onto the counter. Outside, rain tapped against the windows in soft, uneven bursts. I remember staring at her reflection in the dark glass. She immediately corrected herself. Said my father probably mentioned it once. But her face tightened for half a second. Like she knew she'd moved too fast. That night, I checked the attic again. The ledger was gone. After that, the house stopped feeling inherited. It felt occupied. I began noticing small changes. Desk drawers left slightly open. A chair moved inches away from the wall. The thermostat lowered overnight. One morning, I found fresh mud near the basement stairs even though I hadn't gone downstairs in days. The basement smelled metallic, wet concrete, old engine oil. My father rarely allowed me down there as a kid. I understood why when I found the shelves. Hundreds of labeled videotapes. Dates stretching back decades. Most carried ordinary descriptions. DELIVRY. GROCRY. Mailbox. Garage. Some had names, including mine. I carried one upstairs with cold fingers and played it in the study. Security footage. Black and white. My childhood bedroom. I watched myself at 16 sitting at the desk doing homework while a timestamp blinked in the corner. The camera angle came from inside the air vent above my closet. I stopped the tape immediately. The silence afterward felt physical. The rain outside had intensified. Gutters overflowed beside the porch. Water crawled down the windows like veins. That night, I parked 2 streets away and watched the house from inside my car. At 1:13 a.m., Isabel crossed the street wearing a dark raincoat. No umbrella. She unlocked the front door herself. Not picked. Unlocked. I waited 10 minutes before going inside. The house was dark except for the study. I heard scratching sounds behind the wall panel near the fireplace. Metal against metal. When I stepped closer, I saw her kneeling before the open compartment. Her movements were controlled, efficient, not nervous, like muscle memory. The study smelled faintly of her perfume and old cigarette smoke from the fireplace bricks. She turned before I spoke. In the dim light, her face looked exhausted more than guilty. Inside the compartment sat stacks of photographs, cassette tapes, manila folders, and a handgun. My father's revolver. The same one he kept locked away when I was a kid. She looked at the gun first. Not me. That detail stayed with me. I asked why she had a key. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she picked up a photograph and handed it to me. A young woman standing beside a silver Honda in 1994. The image was grainy. Rain streaked across the lens. My father's handwriting appeared again at the bottom. **SUBJECTF. CONTACT confirmed ***. The woman looked terrified. I asked who she was. Isabel finally said her name. Claire Whitaker. Her mother. Then she told me my father had been following her for months before she disappeared. The house suddenly felt colder. Air moved through the vents with a low mechanical hum. I remember touching the edge of the photograph and realizing my hands were shaking. Not because I thought Isabel was lying. Because I could already feel parts of my childhood rearranging themselves in my head. Over the next 2 days, Isabel showed me enough evidence to destroy the version of my father I'd spent 37 years believing. Surveillance photos. License plate records. Bank withdrawals. Cassette tapes filled with whispered observations. He tracked people. Mostly women. Always alone. Always vulnerable somehow. Divorced. Financial trouble. Custody disputes. Temporary housing. There were 7 labeled subjects across 14 years. 3 eventually disappeared. Claire Whitaker vanished in November 1994. No body recovered. Police investigation stalled after 6 months. Isabel had been 11. Her grandmother raised her after that. The reason she became my father's caregiver suddenly seemed obvious. Revenge. Not impulsive revenge. Patient revenge. Years of waiting beside the man she believed destroyed her family. The horrifying part was how believable everything became once I accepted it. My father's emotional distance. His obsession with schedules. Locked rooms. The cameras. The basement archives. Even my mother leaving suddenly when I was young. I found divorce documents hidden in a filing cabinet. She'd accused him of psychological surveillance during mediation. I barely slept. Every room carried new meaning now. Every childhood memory felt contaminated. One afternoon, Isabel brought me coffee while I sat reviewing tapes in the basement. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Dust floated through pale blue light. She looked exhausted, not triumphant. That mattered to me. She admitted she originally planned to steal the evidence after his death and take everything to police. But she hesitated because she thought I deserved to know first. I believed her. Maybe because I needed a version of events that still made emotional sense. Then I found the final tape. Labeled only with a date. November 22, 1994. The footage showed my father driving through heavy rain at night. Dashboard camera angle. Windshield wipers dragging rhythmically across glass. Claire Whitaker sat in the passenger seat. Alive. Crying. The audio distorted constantly from weather interference. But one sentence came through clearly. Not from my father. From Claire. You said he wouldn't find us. Us. Not me. Us. The tape ended seconds later in violent static. Isabel froze when she heard it. That was the first time I saw genuine fear cross her face. And suddenly the story stopped fitting together again. I spent the next morning inside county records offices outside Seattle. Rainwater soaked the cuffs of my jeans every time I crossed parking lots. I searched birth certificates first. Then custody filings. Then missing persons supplements from 1994. Claire Whitaker had a son. Age 4 when she disappeared. No father listed. Child's name sealed by court order after emergency relocation paperwork filed 2 months before she vanished. I found the final clue accidentally. A scanned restraining order. Filed against a man named Daniel Pike. Former private investigator. History of stalking. Surveillance for hire. Violence complaints dismissed repeatedly due to lack of evidence. The attached photograph made my stomach tighten. It was my father. Not Whitaker. Pike. He changed his name in 1998. I sat in the records office staring at fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while cold air conditioning dried rain across my jacket. The pieces shifted all at once. The surveillance archive. The fake identities. The obsession with documentation. My father hadn't been hunting random women. He'd been hunting someone specific. Claire. And apparently protecting someone with her. When I returned home, Isabel was already waiting inside the study. She looked pale. Cornered. I placed the restraining order on the desk between us. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then she finally admitted the part she'd hidden. Claire hadn't disappeared because my father killed her. She disappeared because she helped him fake her death. They were running from another man. Someone violent. Someone connected to the surveillance business my father used to work in during the early 90s. The tapes weren't trophies. They were operational records. Tracking logs. Protection details. My father had hidden Claire and her son under new identities. Only something went wrong later. Claire eventually vanished for real. No explanation. No trace. And Isabel had spent years believing my father betrayed them both somehow. I asked her why she stayed near him all this time. She looked toward the rain-dark window before answering. Because she thought he was still hiding the boy. The house creaked upstairs. Old pipes rattled softly inside the walls. Then she said something that made the room feel suddenly airless. She believed the boy was still alive. And she believed my father gave me the house because the answer was somewhere inside it. That night we searched everything. Behind vents. Under floorboards. Inside insulation. At 2:14 a.m. we found another compartment beneath the basement stairs. Smaller. Newer. Inside sat a stack of sealed envelopes. Each labeled with dates extending into the present year. The handwriting wasn't my father's. It was mine. I didn't remember writing them at first. That was the worst part. The envelopes contained surveillance summaries, vehicle descriptions, schedules, behavioral notes. The same language my father used, the same formatting. One envelope described Isabel's movements over the previous 6 months in disturbing detail. Coffee shop visits, grocery receipts, license plate photos, sleep patterns based on bedroom lighting. I felt physically cold reading them. The basement suddenly smelled sour, claustrophobic, like wet drywall and burnt dust from the furnace. Isabel stepped backward slowly. Then she opened the final envelope. Inside was a photograph taken 3 weeks earlier. My father lying unconscious in his kitchen. Timestamped 37 minutes before emergency services were called. Someone had been inside the house watching him die. The back of the photograph contained one sentence. Asterisk asterisk subject daughter successfully returned asterisk asterisk. My handwriting again. I wish I could say the memory came back dramatically. It didn't. It arrived quietly. Like water rising under a locked door. Fragments first. Conversations. Training exercises. My father teaching me how to document people without being noticed. How to remember license plates. How to sit still long enough that neighbors stopped seeing you. He convinced me it was protection. Preparation. Necessary work. After my mother left, he raised me inside that system until observation became instinct. Then came the final realization. The boy Claire hid in 1994 wasn't missing. I was. Claire Whitaker was my mother. Daniel Pike was never my father. He was the investigator assigned to find her after she disappeared with me. The man who raised me had inserted himself into our lives during the search. Changed identities. Erased records. And slowly convinced himself he'd rescued me. But the second twist was worse. Because Isabel hadn't returned for revenge. She came back because of the letters. My father sent them to her before he died. He knew his stroke was coming. Knew his memory was failing. Knew I'd inherited his compulsions. The safe wasn't protecting evidence from me. It was protecting Isabel from me. I still remember the sound the basement light made after she left. A low electrical buzz. Rain hammering the foundation outside. And the revolver sitting untouched between us on the concrete floor. I never tried to stop her. Because by then, I finally understood why my father locked everything away. He wasn't hiding what he'd done. He was documenting what I might become. That was the night I realized. I had been watching Isabel long before she ever watched me.